good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this information webinar on social impact incentives, SIINC in short. Thank you for joining today. My name is Annemarie Mastenbroek. I'm one of the managers at Aqua for All within the Impact Linked Fund for Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, ILF for WASH in short. Before we move to the agenda, it's good to start with some general housekeeping rules so that we have covered that. Throughout the session, all participants will remain muted, so to minimize background noises. Also, we'd like to ask you to keep your cameras turned off to ensure a smooth video streaming for all participants. Then we will have a Q&A session, a Q&A part at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box. You don't need to wait until the end. Feel free to type your questions anytime. And then lastly, the session is being recorded. We will share the recording afterwards at our website. So thank you for that. Thank you for your cooperation. And we hope you will enjoy the webinar. So while we move to before we move to the agenda, we would like to ask you to fill out the poll that will soon be appearing. So it's really nice to know who is joining us, from which countries, what type of organizations you are with, also with which sector focus, so that we have a general idea. Let me move to the agenda. So the agenda, what we will be discussing today is, first, we will start with a brief introduction about Aqua for All. Then we will explain a bit more about what impact-linked financing is, as well as the fund that we set up. So the impact-linked fund for water, sanitation and hygiene, ILF for WASH. And I think I will mention this abbreviation more often during this session, but the reason that we are giving more information about impact-linked financing and the fund is to contextualize the topic of the webinar today, which is the call for applications for social impact incentives, SIINC, which is one of the key funding instruments under ILF for WASH. After setting this context, we will explain a bit more about how SIINCs work, and then we will move away from the theoretical elements to actual practice. We're really happy and excited to have William Puyo with us. William is the general manager of one of the enterprises, one of the first actually that was contracted for a SIINC. The company is called the Khmer Water Supply Holding, KWSH, in Cambodia. And then following a discussion on the SIINC transaction with KWSH, we will give more practical information about applying for a SIINC, and we will finalize with the Q&A session. So before we present, good to know who is here today with us. So it's myself, it's my colleague Marcela Perez, it's William Puyo from KWSH, and finally my colleague Loes Nijkamp. And Loes will be moderating the online chat room and also facilitate the Q&A session at the end. So now that we have presented ourselves, it is interesting to know for us, but I think also for everyone else who's joining, to get some results of the poll. So I'd like to invite my colleague Loes to give some insights about the results.
Yes, thank you very much. It's nice to see you in the room, also the results as well. So you should be able to see it as well. So we have the majority of the people actually from Sub-Saharan Africa, 11 out of the 24 people who are joining this session. And we have representatives from Asia and Europe as well. The rest is not so well represented, but good to see who is here. And for the type of organization, 30 of you are from impact enterprises, 14 of you are from impact enterprises, 4 are from NGOs, 1 impact investor / financial institution, And we also have some other people joining us as well. And the majority of your organizations focus both on water and sanitation, and the rest is kind of divided between the drinking water and the sanitation. And there's one who has another focus. It's good to see what your focus is. And it's good to see also that the majority of you have heard of SIINC, the social impact incentives. So 13 of you tells that you know what, and 2 of you know it, but don't really remember what they're about. So I hope you will learn more about that during this session. And it's also nice to see that we have some new people joining who do not know yet about SIINC. And I hope this webinar will be then very informative for you. So I hand it back over to Anne-Marie, who's going to tell more.
Thanks so much, Luce. Let me move away from this slide. Nice to hear. It's quite a diverse group. Before we start this discussion on impact-linked finance, and in particular, of course, the SIINCs, we'd like to provide a bit more information about Aqua for All. So at Aqua for All, we are an international foundation with over 2 decades of experience in market-based approaches. So basically, we crowd in private capital and strengthen entrepreneurs to transform the wash sector in different low and middle income countries with a focus on Asia and Africa. We are funded by the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation, the Hilton Foundation, and another corporate foundation. And with that funding, basically, we catalyze our funding with our dual approach, which basically means aiming to bridge both the water service gap and the water financing gap. So on the one hand, we directly support entrepreneurs with direct grants, but also with accelerators, with technical assistance, and with results-based funding, including impact-linked finance. And on the other hand, we also facilitate financial institutions, global asset managers, and impact investors to invest in the water and sanitation sector. And we do so by deploying our funding to de-risk. One of the ways we do that is through first loss capital, as well as technical assistance. And this all feeds into our drive and our vision to create universal access to wash services and products that are affordable, inclusive, and sustainable. And then finally, linked to the impact-linked fund for WASH, we're the pioneering entity that has co-designed the impact-linked financing work in the WASH space together with Roots of Impact. And we are also the funder of ILF for WASH. And I did mention Roots of Impact. They are an organization specialized in managing catalytic capital, and they're also an expert in impact-linked financing. So all the work that we do within the overall impact-linked fund for WASH, but also with SIINCs, are supported by Roots of Impact. So before we move to the fund and specifically also the social impact incentives, I'd like to contextualize a bit. So what is impact-linked financing? As you can see on the slide, it's with theoretical or technical wordings, but you may be familiar with a few of them. So with blended finance, result-based finance, impact investing. And basically, impact-linked financing is all of these. So it's positioned in the intersections of these, meaning that it has overlaps and similarities with all. So I won't go into much technical detail here because I'd rather like to emphasize the key features of impact-linked financing. So the first key feature is that it's a very bottom-up enterprise-centric approach. So we really focus on enabling enterprises to optimize for impact without compromising on their commercial viability. So basically enabling enterprises to choose for both commercial scaling while also enhancing impact. And when working with the enterprises on impact-linked financing is really a joint process. So we collaboratively for instance, work on determining the right metrics, but also the costs that are associated with it, basically to determine those metrics that strategically fit with an enterprise's growth and impact plan. So we always make sure that we're fully aligned without imposing top-down directions. The second feature of ILF is that it is impact-focused and performance-based. So the actual financial benefits are based on how much impact an enterprise creates. And then last but not least, ILF is focused on additionality. So we don't provide incentives that are business as usual, but really focus on going the extra mile to create impact that you wouldn't focus on or plan for without ILF for WASH. I think, and then lastly, overall underlying to ILF is that the incentives are jointly determined and that they are progressive. So the more impact an enterprise creates, the more funding you receive. That is it for impact-linked finance. So back now to the funds. ILF for WASH is a fund designed to enhance impact for entrepreneurs to really scale. So to get access to innovative finance and scale in both business and impact terms. Let me go to the next slide. So it's a fund with the size of 10 million euros with funding from Aqua for All. And we are working with three instruments: social impact incentives, but also impact-linked loans and technical assistance. And I will give a bit of more information about technical assistance TA in the next slide. For this call for applications, we are looking at a ticket size of between 300,000 and 350,000 euros per investment. But the actual size really depends on a variety of factors, so including the growth stage of an enterprise, but also profitability, investment rounds, etc. In terms of target geographies, we look for enterprises that are based and active in Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as the MENA region. And the targeted enterprises, so the type of enterprises that we are looking for, are, of course, impact-driven, with the potential to scale commercially and reach impact goals. And we also particularly look for enterprises that target to reach low-income customers and have gender and climate-related impact. So what is unique about ILF for WASH and why we as an organization decided to set it up is the big potential we see to bridge the financing gap. So really to support enterprises that are impact driven, but that struggle to balance it with commercial scaling. So really it's also about bridging the situation of only receiving grants to being able to attract impact investments. So our overarching goal and focus of the impact-linked fund for WASH is twofold. It's creating impact additionality as well as attracting private capital. And so we do so by our innovative financing offering, of which SIINC is the main instrument, but we also, and that is also unique, is what we also have is the technical assistance that we offer both for enterprises and ecosystem enablers. So we have a TA trajectory with different programs. The main focus of this TA is on impact measurement and management, IMM, but also investment readiness. But in some cases, we provide targeted TA alongside a SIINC transaction, that is, if there is a need for it. So our main goal also of the TA is to build a pipeline of enterprises that we can work with, and also enable other actors in the sector to support those enterprises. So then lastly, we have a dedicated component of research, learning, and knowledge sharing. And that is, again, also to help other WASH actors, so enterprises, but also impact investors, TA providers, to help them understand where impact-linked finance is positioned, in the whole spectrum of different instruments and to share our learnings and to see how we can potentially work together in the future. So the journey to date, as you can see on the left of the screen, we had in 2020, we launched the SIINC as an instrument. And based on the learnings that we had and also the interest that we saw from funders and from enterprises, we decided to launch the impact-linked fund for WASH in 2022. And that included also a TA component, and we as well included another instrument, impact-linked loans. And since then, we have structured impact-linked financing contracts, so both SIINCs and impact-linked loans with 8 different enterprises. So as you can see, you see the logos also on the slide. It's ATEC, Akista, KWSH, which we will focus on soon today. And then also Jibu, Aqua Clara, Tap Effect, Vida Sasa, and Pure Fresh. And these enterprises are operating in different countries in Asia and Africa. And in addition, you don't see the logos on the screen because we wanted to keep it a bit calm, not too many logos on the slide, but we also provided TA to 21 different enterprises, and 5 local TA providers were trained to deliver TA under ILF for WASH. So that was it on the SIINC. I will now give a bit of an introduction about what social impact incentives are, and then we will move to William and my colleague Marcella to have a discussion on an actual case. So as you can see here on the picture, SIINC enables the enterprise or enterprises to continue or even accelerate its efforts to generate deep impact, yet while also scaling commercially and offering sufficient returns to investors. So how it works, we as Aqua for All, as the outcome funder, we incentivize and reward enterprises with time-limited payments for achieving predefined impact outcomes. And then SIINC acts as an additional revenue stream that directly improves the P&L, so the profitability of the enterprise, which in turn also makes it more interesting for an investor, and hence also then the enterprise to scale. To be eligible for SIINC, we need enterprises to also raise repayable investments in parallel. The nature of that can vary, so it can be debt, equity, or a combination. And then finally, the achieved outcomes are checked by an independent impact verifier, which will then enable, if it's positively verified, to release the agreed outcome funding, which is often spread over a period of 2 to 3 years. So I hope to give some bit of a picture of what SIINC are. Now, as we're all talking about all these theoretical elements and principles and the rationale behind it, I'm very happy and excited to now jump to the actual case of today. So William Puyo, the general manager of KWSH, will tell a bit more about KWSH. And then my colleague Marcela Perez will give more details about the specifics of the SIINC transaction with KWSH. Yeah, so over to you now, William. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for the introduction. So before I tell about what we do exactly, I'd just like to share a little bit about the background of the problem that we face. So in Cambodia, there's still well over 10 million people, representing almost 80% of the rural population, that do not have access to piped water services. So instead, they rely quite heavily on alternative sources, which face often significant issues relating to quality, reliability, convenience of access, and cost. So there are, though, hundreds of small-scale piped water operators that are licensed by the government, and they're responsible for supplying households and other water users in rural communities. However, most of those operators don't have the technical expertise that they need to actually run those businesses effectively. And due to their small size, they struggle to achieve economies of scale or get access to the capital that they need. So as a result, they often cover only a very small part of their license areas with pipeline, So most households remain excluded from the market and they have no option to connect in the first place. And those who are covered, they often face quite poor service quality. So KWSH was established in 2013 to specifically address those challenges. Our model is focused on consolidating and professionalizing the sector, specifically by acquiring underperforming stations and then improving their service quality and investing to increase their production and distribution capacities. So we're structured with a head office where we concentrate the management team with all of the key expertise that we need to manage our portfolio of subsidiary stations. And that structure allows the group to systematically implement our best practices for high service quality. It's also significantly more cost effective compared to a single operator working alone, because we can then efficiently allocate all of the human resources from the head office across different projects. Furthermore, as we grow, we're able to consolidate orders for key inputs and so obtain lower unit costs than the others can obtain. And those economies of scale are really critical if we want to be able to viably expand the service to poorer and lower density areas. Finally, our model of aggregating these small projects into a larger portfolio helps to attract the kind of investment from specialist utilities investors who otherwise do not consider those smaller projects in isolation. So as of today, our portfolio includes 5 different license areas that cover over 40,000 households. But by early 2025, we're going to finish completing all of the pipeline expansions to cover over 90% of those households with infrastructure. We've already connected over 24,500 customers, which represents well over 110,000 individual beneficiaries. But since a lot of the pipeline has been completed only recently, this number is still growing rapidly every month. And while we're very proud of these achievements, there's still a lot of work that we have remaining to do. So we're now well positioned to capitalize on the platform we've built over the years as we finally reach the scale needed to attract those larger specialist investors in the utility sector. And so our model moving forwards is to replicate the same successful model through new station acquisitions and build outs. And in fact, we actually recently acquired our 6th license area, which was linked to our SIINC targets. But I'll leave to Marcela then to explain exactly how our metrics are structured and what we achieve together. Thanks.
Thank you so much, William. Yeah, let's pull the slides on the SIINC transaction.
Thank you, Anna Marie, and thanks, William. So before we jump into the specific impact metrics, I just want to mention that first and foremost, KWSH was one of the first companies to join us, as has been mentioned during this webinar. And the purpose was to go alone in a journey, because we saw that, KWSH was trying to balance out, the commercial orientation along with their impact focus. So the metrics were structured to really incentivize KWSH to deepen its impact while not distorting its overall approach. That was really important for us. And the close collaboration and coordination between both the ones, KWSH, Aqua, and of course, the countries that impact as well, involved in this transaction were necessary to find the right balance between commercial and impact performance. And this is something that is really key to the structuring of a SIINC transaction. That being said, it's also important to mention that the SIINC transaction has already ended. So it's really nice to have William in the room, because he's going to be able to talk about the results of the SIINC and how KWSH and himself and the team experienced this journey with us. On the impact metrics themselves, I'll focus on the 2 main impact metrics. The first one was the percentage of connected households in 2 areas where KWSH operates, that is Puyo and Chulong. And the focus here was the further expansion of connections in the 2 of the more mature stations where they operate, and where growth plans were stagnating a little bit because the newer stations were easily more expandable. Then the second impact metric was the additionality level of new licensed areas. And so in this sense, the SIINC transaction was aiming to reward KWSH for giving a greater weight to impact metrics when considering which new stations to acquire. So this had to do with providing access to water to BOP populations, so base of the pyramid populations, or access to water and expansion potential in areas where there was more fragmentation or less densely populated areas. In short, this is what we focused on. Then the SIINC amount itself was had a cap or a maximum of 350,000 euros. And the payouts were made yearly after each impact verification. One important element to mention here is that impact verifications are conducted independently. So we, as the outcome funder, the outcome payer, will work closely with an independent impact verifier to go to the field and to see what results are being achieved. That is usually that for in the case of KWSH, it was made on a yearly basis, and payments were made depending on how much impact was achieved in each verification process. And then the final results were, as William already mentioned, about 2,500 additional households, which is approximately 10,000 people reached. And then one additional station acquired with those relevant impact metrics in mind, the impact metrics that had to do with BOP population, access, etc., etc. That in short is the SIINC transaction that was structured. And now we will move on to the Q&A with William.
Marcella, we saw in the chat room that Marcella was not always audible, but we hope that part of it was informative, and that the rest is on the slides. Please also feel free to reach out to us if you would like to know more. So a Q&A session with William.
All right, thank you. And I'll try to speak louder to see if everyone can hear me. So on the Q&A, William, first question to you. How was the experience with the SIINC, with the social impact incentive?
Right. I mean, maybe I can just go through a little bit the sequencing of the process leading to the final SIINC contract being signed, as far as I recall it. So we had originally heard of SIINC through one of our shareholders, and based on the information we found, it seemed quite well aligned with what we wanted to achieve. So we went through a fairly straightforward online application at that time, which included the opportunity to upload a separate longer form business plan document, which is something that we already had available in place. So within around 1 month, we were contacted with follow-up questions before we moved into the next selection round with a 1-hour interview by call. And everything up till then would seem to be really about the funders building a solid understanding of KWSH's business model, our operations, and the impact that we achieve. So after that, we moved into specifically building out proposed metrics to be applied for the SIINC. With some back and forth and brainstorming until we completed the structuring and finally signed the contract in May of 2021. So the biggest challenge, obviously, then was going through the original structuring process. The total time from beginning to signing was around 8 or 9 months, and it did involve a lot of sharing of information and brainstorming about the appropriate structures to apply for us. But that being said, I mean, the process was really a great experience because there was such a clear willingness from our counterparty to take the time needed to develop a sufficiently detailed understanding of KWSH to then build appropriate incentive structure for us that would lead to the improved impact that we were all seeking together. So overall, I would say the process was actually well balanced and did not require an excessive amount of time relative to the benefits of the final contract. And in contrast, we've had previous experiences where we felt that KWSH would have been an excellent fit for other grant providers who were to help us for those last mile distribution areas at our stations. However, often you're not eligible for those kinds of grant providers due to very specific criteria that they define and which are very rigid and inflexible, regardless of the actual merits of the project and the impact that you're generating. So from that perspective, the SIINC contract was a really welcome addition from our perspective to the funding landscape and filled a gap that other more rigid funders are not able to adequately handle in the same way. And so it makes sense then that the process should take a little bit longer and be a little bit more involved. And once the contract was underway, our counterpart was really supportive as we reported on our progress every quarter. And then at the end of every annual verification period, they shared with us the resulting assessment reports, which contained really valuable information for us, like customer feedback, for example, that otherwise we don't always have the resources to do ourselves.
Nice. Thank you so much. Very important that you mentioned the flexibility that you experience during the structuring and contracting process. And because that's really one of the key elements that we seek to address with the SIINC. It's really a construction between the enterprise, the entrepreneur, and ourselves. So great to hear that you had a positive experience in that regard. Our next question is, what were the main benefits of the SIINC for KWSH?
Okay, well, I mean, the biggest benefits really came from the structure, which was designed to help us deepen the impact that we generate, especially in terms of ensuring that the service reaches and is affordable to the poorest and most rural households within our license areas. See, what always makes me so enthusiastic about our mission at KWSH is that our commercial and impact metrics are essentially the same, namely the number of households that we reach and the volume of water that we supply to those users. And we established our model specifically on the basis that there are many economically viable areas for piped water utilities, which we can invest in so long as we get our business fundamentals right. However, there is always effectively a natural limit as to what we can achieve alone, because in any license area where we operate, there will always be some households which would remain excluded, either because they can't afford to connect to the system or because they're in a lower density area, which is not viable for us to build our infrastructure out to reach. So for example, with the first metric, that really helped us to address that issue at our two oldest stations, where the connection rates would otherwise have stagnated in the absence of the SIINC contract. So it allowed us to not only be more aggressive with discount promotions on the connection fees, but it also gave us the necessary impetus to approve an additional almost 60 kilometers of new pipeline expansion to cover over 1,500 new households, which we otherwise would likely have continued to neglect in the absence of those incentives as we focused on more easily accessible areas at our newer stations. So those additional investments actually ended up being necessary for us to be able to reach the maximum target by the end of the contract. And that also really highlights the great flexibility that was built into the structure, because we'd agreed on what was the overall target in terms of number of household, or the rate of connections to achieve, the maximum incentive payments. However, it was left to us then to decide how we wanted to approach reaching those goals, which could mean either reducing the connection fees or expanding the new pipeline areas. And as mentioned, then we ended up opting for a combination of those two approaches that worked best for us. And for the second metric, targeting the new station acquisitions, so that associated SIINC was definitely a really key factor in convincing us to close the deal for our 6th license area earlier this year before the contract ended. Otherwise, in the absence of which, we probably would have kicked the can down the road a little bit longer. So as a result, I mean, when we had this opportunity to sign the SIINC contract, we had immediate buy-in from our investors, because it was clear, just as had been their experience from the beginning, that there was going to be very good, strong benefits for all the parties involved. So for the grant providers, it makes sure that the company sticks to the mission statement and its impact objectives. For our own investors, the SIINC improved our commercial performance actually by allowing us to install connections to last mile households and then serve those households in perpetuity, so that increases our recurring revenue streams. And for the end users then, especially those bottom of pyramid households, it enabled them to access services that they otherwise would have continued to be excluded from. And so finally, our experience with that whole process convinced us that we can continue to replicate the same approach where we target commercially viable license areas and then find external support to address those last mile distribution issues, which, while not a commercial imperative for us, are very much part of the impact that we want to generate.
Great, thank you, William. And I think that speaks to the additionality that the SIINC transaction was aiming for, was going for. And it's great to see that, that aim of really bridging or getting a balance between commercial and impact goals was achieved with the SIINC transaction, and that you actually see that it's a sustainable model going forward for KWSH. So that's very neat to see. And of course, I was visiting KWSH just a few weeks ago, and it was really great to see the impact on the field. It's a fantastic work that you're doing there. The next question is, what advice would you give an enterprise interested in applying for ILF for WASH, or for SIINC in this case, for a social impact incentive?
A few things I'd highlight. So, I mean, I'd say, first of all, make sure that you have a very clear business plan document of some form, which will make the process much easier for the funder to understand your organization as clearly and in-depth as possible. It should also be able to demonstrate that you already have a fairly solid platform supported by private capital and internal revenues, on top of which then the ILF can help build in that additionality that they're so focused on. You'd also need to have a good understanding then relating to that about the potential trade-offs that you're facing between your impact and your commercial imperatives. So you should be able to clearly explain what a scenario A would look like in business as usual, and what you might wish to achieve under a scenario B if you had targeted external support to achieve it. Finally, you need to have available metrics, ideally, which are both measurable and independently verifiable. So in the case of KWSH, this was relatively straightforward, in particular with the number of household connections, because this is something you can count, you can verify in person for the presence of physical infrastructure. But it might be a little bit more of a challenge for other organizations where the impact generated is more qualitative or difficult to specifically measure. That being said, while you're the expert in your own business, Aqua for All, they are familiar with structuring these kinds of incentive plans. So once they have a sufficient understanding of how your business works, they can really help on the brainstorming side of things to determining what metrics would work best. So in our case, we had originally only proposed the first metric relating to those household connections. But after they familiarized themselves with KWSH, they were the ones to suggest the second metric for new license acquisitions, which we otherwise would not have thought of. So in that sense, the structuring is really an iterative process, which may lead to something that you did not necessarily expect when starting. So definitely embrace the collaborative nature of the process, and you should get some really interesting results.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, and that's a really good point you're making. The SIINC transactions have a focus on impact verification, of course, and that is tied to the collection of data and robust data systems, really. Great. I think those are the three questions that we had for you. William, thank you so much for participating, for providing insight. And just as that, before we move on to the next slide, just a reminder for everyone who has joined the webinar, we have information on the SIINC Call for applications and also some case studies, the criteria for applying, all of them in our website, aquaforall.org. So feel free to go to our website and check the information that we're making, that we have made available there for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcella, for mentioning that. And also thanks, William, for sharing your experiences and insights. I think that's invaluable on top of the more theoretical part that we just had. So yeah, let's move to the next part. I will try to keep it brief. So really on the practical part of the call for applications, before we will move to the Q&A to also allow you to ask the questions that you have. Maybe in the meantime, you already did. Yeah, so to summarize the key criteria that Marcella also referred to that are on our website, the target sector is water, sanitation, and hygiene, so WASH. As where it's based, basically all enterprises are eligible that are based in Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the MENA region. As for the legal form, we don't have any constraints, but important to mention is that your enterprise or enterprises should be revenue generating. Alongside the SIINC transaction, the enterprise should be raising repayable investments with the size of at least 500,000 euros. So that can be in the form of debt, loans, or equity, or a combination, or in the process of getting there in the final stages. As for the enterprise stage, so we're looking at growth stage with a minimum of 3 years of track record. So really also that relates to the financial sustainability. So we're looking at enterprises that have achieved break-even profitability or have concrete terms to do so in the short term. It's important that the main business lines are WASH focused, and then with a particular emphasis on low-income communities, gender, and or climate. And it is also important to be able to track the impact, to have impact evidence, so that this can be anything, case studies, impact reports, but also to have a system in place or a process in place to collect data. So to have a baseline and to frequently report on that data. So that is the most important. We also have frequently asked questions in a document, but just to pick a few. It's about social impact incentives, SIINC in short, with a ticket size of approximately between 300,000 and 350,000 euros, depending on the enterprise. The size of financial rewards are based on the outcomes. So the more impact, the higher the funding, and it is achieved over a period of approximately 2 to 3 years. So all enterprises are eligible that have a WASH-related solution and that are impact-driven. Then also important to mention is the deadline for application is 15th of December at 12 a.m. So good to know that, keep that in mind. Have captured all of the relevant information in this slide. Loes will also type the links in the chat so that you can access them. So it has the link to the application document, the form. There's the web page with all the information, but also our leaflets. If you're not yet sure if you are eligible for ILF, you can go to the ILF matching tool. It's a very short tool to assess whether you're eligible. And then all frequently asked questions are in one document. So yeah, as a final reminder, the deadline is December 15th. So with that being said, I would like to open the floor for Q&A. So I will hand over to my colleague, Loes. I cannot see all the questions, so please take over from me. I'm sure that there are several.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, there are definitely several questions already in the chat. We'll try to go through all of them. But also feel free indeed to continue to ask questions in the chat. So let me just start with the first one. Marcella, maybe you can answer this one, which is you of course we mentioned the KPIs used for KWSH, but could you maybe say a little bit more about what the KPIs what KPIs are used to assess the impact and the social outcomes for the SIINCs?
Sure. So there are no set KPIs. As it has been mentioned, the process of structuring a SIINC is very collaborative with the entrepreneur, with the enterprise, and it depends upon the enterprise's business model and the impact that it's trying to achieve. Of course, we have some general metrics, that fall into, that are commonly used for private water operators, or for sanitation enterprises. But in reality, there is no set KPI. It is a matter of just going through the process together and seeing what works for the company. One important thing to mention is that we, of course, are looking for additionality. So it's looking at the business of the company and seeing where we can come in and nudge you and push you towards more impact that could not be achieved without the SIINC. So that is in short my answer. I hope it suffices. But as I said before, we also have some case studies on the website, so feel free to just browse through and see what kind of metrics have been decided upon or have been selected for different types of enterprises.
Yes, thank you, Marcella. I think that's very, very clear that we take an individual approach that. And then another question is on the criteria for wanting to raise repayable finance of at least 500K. There are some questions about that. So do we have any criteria for these investments, and does it need to be repayable? And what if that investment has already been contracted? Does that matter? Can you elaborate a little bit more about that as well, Marcella?
Yeah, so in short, investment has to be repayable. So it has to be private capital, either in the form of debt or equity or mezzanine investments or a combination of all, whether it is contracted or not. So we work in different ways. A company might be talking to a private investor, and we commit with SIINC, and the SIINC is also a form or a way of incentivizing a private investor to really go and invest in a company. But if you have already contracted any type of investment with a funder, then that could very well also be taken into account. So it really we're really flexible in that sense. So either contracted or non-contracted. Those are things that we can work with.
Yes, thank you. Just maybe a follow-up question on that. Is the 500K that needs to be raised, is that a compulsory threshold?
That is the minimum threshold. So we're looking for companies that have achieved a certain level of maturity, a certain level of growth. And the 500,000 threshold really helps us to see where you are in your capital investment efforts. So yes, it is a compulsory criteria.
Yeah, maybe just a short thing to add is that we also support in that if you're really in the last phases, that we also offer our network. And in some cases, we actually in previous things we had TA alongside to really get the final push needed for an investor. So that can also help your to improve your proposition if you're very close to an actual deal. Just to add that.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe to follow up on that, actually, you're mentioning additional technical assistance or support that we give as well. You also mentioned it in during explaining ILF. There was one question on what type of support will we get during technical assistance, and maybe you can also elaborate a little bit more about what this call is specifically for and what kind of technical assistance comes with that as well.
Yeah, sure. So for technical assistance, we basically have two main types of TA pre-investment, so prior to a SIINC. So one is called foundational support, which is more focused for targeted at enterprises that are commercially mature, but yet don't have an impact measurement and management system in place, or maybe not advanced enough. So there are a lot of enterprises that maybe do have an impact statement or even a theory of change, but one of the things could be that they don't yet have outcome levels or impact focused indicators, or not yet the right data collection system. So basically the foundational support is there for enterprises who are a bit less advanced in impact measurement and management, or that still needs investment readiness support. And then for enterprises that are a bit further advanced, we have a bootcamp. So these are the two main types of TA prior to a SIINC. And then what we also provide is really tailored technical assistance alongside a SIINC transaction. And that the theme for that or the focus of that can be anything. It's really dependent on the specific needs of the enterprise in relation to the foreseen impact metrics, so the SIINC metrics. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it was very clear. Maybe another question for you, Marcella. It's been a couple of questions on how the payments are working. So there have been questions on after how many months and with what like kind of frequency do the payments go out, but also is it indeed that the financing is 100% based on results, or is there also any financing upfront?
So a SIINC, a social impact incentives incentive is an outcome payment, an outcome-based payment, just to put it in simple words. It's aimed at incentivizing an enterprise to go the extra mile in terms of impact. And in that sense, we give the enterprise, the freedom to see how it'll achieve the set upon metrics. And we also give the time needed for, for the enterprise to really get through the process of achieving the impact. So in that sense, the SIINCs are structured so that payments are frequent, but they're only given after achieving a certain level of results, outcomes, impact. In the case of the SIINC transactions that we have structured before, including KWSH, it has been usually, the payments have been usually made on a yearly basis. So after, say, the SIINC transaction was structured, then after the first year, an impact verifier goes to the field, verifies the results achieved. After verifying the results achieved, then we, as the outcome payer, make the payment. I'm being a little redundant here, but that's how it works. And another thing that is important to mention is that it's not a black and white type of situation. Different enterprises will achieve different levels of results or impact. And in that sense, we also try to be flexible and reward the enterprise based on the actual results achieved. So say you didn't achieve, 100% of the target after the first year, you will still, but you achieved, I don't know, a certain percent, 60%, 70%, whatever that is, you will be rewarded for the effort that went into it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe in the meantime, please continue to post your questions in the chat if you have those. Also, if you have any questions to William from KWSH, if you would like to know a little bit more from his experience, feel free to also put those in the chat. But let me continue with the questions that we have. Annemarie, maybe you can take up this one. There's one question about the activities. So it's like, can it be activities related to access to water, but can it also be activities related to sanitation or hygiene products?
Yes, definitely. We welcome enterprises like focusing on either drinking water, sanitation, or hygiene. Actually, also welcoming sanitation and hygiene enterprises, as we have seen, the majority of our portfolio is drinking water, which is of course also, it's all interesting, and we can definitely identify metrics for all these three subsectors.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we really focus on WASH, so all the elements that are included in that. So
it is maybe good to mention that it is easier to identify metrics and to structure a SIINCs with B2C models, so with business to consumer models, because for the impact verification, it's necessary that we get end user data. So with, for example, business to business models, that is a bit more complicated. I wouldn't say to not apply if you do have a model like that, but just saying managing expectation that for B2C models, it's the easiest.
Yeah, thank you. Marcella, if I can pose another question to you, and that is, can the SIINC also be used to fund subsidized pricing for products and services to identify vulnerable communities, for example, poor households?
Let me have a look at the question. I don't see the question. So the question is whether the SIINC can subsidize lower income segments.
No, so it can be used to subsidize the pricing of the products to be able to reach the vulnerable communities.
Okay, so we actually, well, the SIINC doesn't act as a mechanism to subsidize the products per se, but we do structure metrics so that you are able to go and serve BOP customers, so that you are able to go and reach lower income segments. And provide the products and services that you aim to for those specific segments. In that sense, what I'm trying to say here is that because this is an outcome payment, that to manage expectations, also we do not provide upfront payment, and we do not really subsidize any the pricing of the products. We just come in as an outcome payer that rewards efforts for impact and for achieving your social and environmental targets, or social and environmental KPIs.
Yeah, just maybe thanks for that. Just to maybe quickly add on is that SIINC does provide an additional revenue stream that you can use at least to temporarily cross-subsidize. So, but of course, at a certain moment, the SIINC payments end. So right after 3 years, so then it wouldn't help anymore. But in that period, that could be possible.
Yeah, well, I think that's very clear. There came in another question about the criteria on investment. So maybe just to clarify that a little bit more. So the question is about that SIINC is about grants, but the criteria I mentioned debt, equity, and mezzanine. Could you maybe just shortly explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the SIINC itself is, as it was rightly mentioned, is a grant payment or an outcome payment, but one of the criteria for working with an enterprise is that it's able to raise private capital or private investment in parallel. So the SIINC is a non-repayable funding, but then the enterprise needs to be able to raise either debt or equity or mezzanine or any form of them combined.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's clear. And maybe we can close off with two practical questions, and then we are also heading towards the end of this session. And that is well, the first one is, there is a question about now, of course, we have the call for applications for SIINC open until the 15th of December. And somebody's wondering if there is going to be another round in 2025. Henri, is there something you can share about that?
Yes, it is planned. A new call for application is planned for 2025, but also you manage expectation. We have planned for it, but it's planned now for Q3 2025. But it could be that it's postponed a bit. So, but there's definitely another call for applications coming besides the current one.
Yeah, thank you. But anyway, of course, the call for applications for SIINC specifically is open now until the 15th of December. So it's good to keep that date in mind. And we're looking very much forward. If you feel like you're a good fit for the SIINC program, we're looking forward to receiving your application. And then somebody's also wondering if we have the opportunity to support local enterprises to apply for the program. Maybe I can just take this one myself. We do not, of course, you're always very free to reach out to us if you have any questions on how to apply or any more of the criteria. If you're struggling with that, we do not offer specific support as has been asked in this question, of the opportunity of a consulting firm to support these local enterprises. But I do want to mention that the application form as it is now is very focused on understanding your business. So for example, indeed, are you just very basic on like which countries are you operating, which services do you offer? And we're not yet going into the depth of how for example, the SIINC is structured. That's going to be in a separate phase. So I hope that these enterprises feel very welcome to of course apply and are able to be able to apply to this as well. And with this, we come to the end, almost to the end of our session. Thank you very much for joining us. We just have a final poll that we would like to share with you. Just get a bit of an impression on whether you would be interested in applying for a SIINC, but also if this webinar has met your expectations. We're very curious to hear more about that. And let me hand over to, while you're answering, let me hand over to Annemarie to do some closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Loes. And indeed, with this final slide, we come to an end of this webinar. I would like to thank all of you who joined, took the effort to listen in, for your attention. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or to check our website with all the documents that are also hyperlinked in the chat. William, thank you a million for joining us. It's been really interesting and pleasant to also hear from you, from the actual experience of working with us, besides the theory. Marcella, Loes, also thanks for your comments and additional information. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Thank you, and have a nice rest of the day.